So, in the previous class, we had we had discussed on the political science aspect, Rawls' theory of justice, and in this class we said we'll discuss some concept on IR, right, to have a fair assessment of our interest as well. So let's begin our discussion without much delay. Yes, Dilip, good evening. So, before we begin our discussion, a very simple question to you. I mean, a lot of countries are experiencing something called economic interdependence, right? Think of, say, USA and China. I mean, they have around $580 billion worth of trade, right? It could be various aspects. However, they still experience all these disputes with respect to taxes, intellectual property, etc. Same goes for India, right? India and China also have around $130 billion worth of trade. Trade in things like pharma, trade in things like technology, right? But still, despite these, we do experience issues at the border, right? If you remember, the Doklam standoff of 2017, and we are also aggressively fighting at 13,000 feet in Ladakh continuously. But yet we are also trading at the same time. How is this happening? And if we are so important for each other trade-wise, then why the clashes? And why this proxy war? It's not just some border clashes. We are also experiencing a lot of proxy wars. In fact, before the Ukraine-Russia war, Ukraine was a very important transit point for Russia's natural gas supply. But still, they chose to invade Ukraine. So the question is that if commerce is the ultimate pacifier, we say that if we have commercial relations, then it becomes the ultimate pacifier. If this was the case, then why are we still fighting is a concern. Why is it that there is strategic mistrust amongst countries? This clearly means that there are things beyond commerce, beyond the control of economic interdependence, right? So let's understand this, this duality, that we do have economic interdependence and yet we are constantly in this state of fear with respect to our neighbors and other big parts, right? So today, in case you want to write all these things, it will be better. It sets up the context, right? So I might dictate certain things and then you can also keep making notes on certain aspects. So as I said, there are two theories that we have as far as IR is concerned, basic theories, which will help you understand at least half of the relations that happen between any two countries globally. One such theory, and that would be your first point for the day, is realism. Right? Please write realism. Yes, Galwan Valley conflict, definitely. Realism. So this concept has 4 components. The very first component is that there is only one major actor, state. That's it. We believe that state is the only major actor across the globe. There are no other actors. I mean, of course there are. We have MNCs, we have NGOs, we have these international organizations, we have individuals, but they are not the main players. The main player is the country. Now, in this particular theory, the idea is to simplify it. So let's focus only on state as the major actor, not these. These are too small to make a significant change or difference, is what this theory believes in. Point 1, that state is the major actor. Everything that is happening is being done to pursue the interest, the goal of the state. That's point 1. Second aspect of this is very simple to understand. Anarchy rules. Number 2, anarchy rules. See, for let's say domestic policies, let's talk about domestic politics. We have the government to resolve problems. We have the courts to take care of issues. We also have the police. I mean, there are multiple mechanisms if any issue happens or arises in the country. But internationally, who is this or what is this overarching authority? Do we have something called the world government? UN. But what can the UN do? Can it issue binding orders? Very valid point. We do have UN. But UN can only issue what? Resolutions. Is it binding? No. If there's a crisis in the country, UN can, of course, send the peacekeeping forces, but not without consent. So ultimately, to be very clear, there is nothing called world government. There is no world police. So, anarchy rules. Just mention below this. No world government. No world government. So, each state has its own security needs, and you have to choose to trust or maybe fear or guard against the other countries. It's you alone in this difficult world. That's how it is, right? So concept number 2 or element number 2 of this idea is there is anarchy. Please don't expect somebody else to come and intervene in between. Clear? Now number 3, which is an extension of this entire idea, is self-help. That's it. The entire system is a self-help system. Meaning what? I mean, you cannot rely on others, frankly, right? This entire system is based on you helping yourself. So, can't rely on anyone. Again, you might say that, sir, but we do have, we have had various relations, allies, etc. To give you a very good example of this concept of allies. So, Egypt had a very good relationship with countries like Britain and France, right? Thriving allies. But then in 1956, when the President Nasir, he went on to nationalize the Suez Canal, right? Now the Suez Canal was the main trading route or trading point between Europe and Asia, especially oil. As soon as a country thought that I have to think of my interest, the allies suddenly became enemies. In fact, they actively tried to plot by pushing Israel, right? That please attack, we'll join in the garb of trying to protect peace and harmony. It was only because of interference of USA and Soviet that this did not happen. So I think Nasir learned it the hard way, that there's nothing called long-term allies or allies always. I mean, you might say, but sir, what about NATO? Of course, the expansion of NATO, especially post the collapse of Soviet Union, countries like Poland and Hungary joining, the USA also knew this very well, that we have to have more and more people in our team, because they knew that this peace time might not continue for long. So every such thing is based on our own personal interest. If we try to trust too much some other state, that is what realism says, you might fail. I mean, we know it very well with our personal experience. Excessive trust and faith on a very friendly nation, right? So much so that we pushed for their UN permanent seat also, right? All thanks to Nehruji's contribution that we eventually helped China secure a seat, which now actively blocks everything against us, right? And eventually leading to a war as well, right? Before the war, we were singing songs of how Hindi Chini reference to China, bhai bhai. And suddenly we are singing songs in the praise and glory of our armed forces members who are losing lives. So we know the hard way that this is just a self-help system. There is no one to come to your rescue if things go wrong. And this is what every country also experiences and faces. That's the hard reality, right? And the fourth aspect of this entire concept, please write, power is the ultimate goal. Power is the ultimate goal. So we say that, it's power, which is both, should I say, means to, and also measure of anybody's security. It's a means of security, and it is also the measure of your security. So, power is the means to, as well as a measure of security. That's the idea. Now, if you have power, power will give you more options. Options like you can coerce people, you can deter people. So we say that every state is trying to maximize its power. This entire bid is to enhance power. And just to clarify, this entire concept of realism is based on zero-sum game. What is this zero-sum game, this idea? Zero-sum game, this phrase, means that things are limited. So they believe that power and resources are limited. Okay, a very important term that you should understand. A lot of countries believe this, that two things are limited: power and resources. Now, if you believe that power and resources are limited, how does it change your approach towards other countries? Tell me, what can be a consequence of this? If you believe in this idea, if let's say seats in UPSC are limited, right? This means what? Competition. This also means that if somebody is going to claim your seat, this means your seat is gone, right? So if resources are limited, this means this concept is quite relative in nature. Meaning, if you gain something, it will only come at the cost of my loss. That's the idea. Zero-sum game, right? If things are, say, at 100, the moment somebody takes something from here, this has to always be 100. If some country suddenly gets +2, this +2 comes from some other country. This is, the harsh truth also, and this is largely a very interesting aspect of IR theory. There is no win-win situation in most cases. Can you give me an example of how this is visible, or which kind of relationship do you think this happens in a lot?
Trade deficit and
trade deficit, etc. Two countries which are stuck in this situation are India and China, right? We are stuck in this, and we deal with China with the lens of realism, right? We have had in the past been very liberal towards China, but now we deal with the strict lens of realism. That if at any cost that country increases its resources, its authority, be it something as simple as purchasing more weapons, it comes at the cost of us, right? And in fact, you would see the same thing happen in Cold War also. It was a zero-sum game, because both these countries were trying to have in their group as many countries as possible. So every country which joins this gang is one less country that remains with this gang. Zero-sum game. Realism. Okay. So these are four very crucial elements to understand this concept. Now, write the next heading, key concepts. Key concepts. And tell me, what is the meaning of this word called security dilemma? Can you, through its basic understanding, tell me what this means? The very first concept that we have. Once you know these terms, you will understand that this is what is happening across the board. At least this is what we should focus on, especially with our neighbors. Those days of goodwill gestures and Gujarat doctrine should be days of the past, frankly. Realism is what should work, especially with our neighbors, right? At least in the current situation. So what is this security dilemma? Tell me. Dilemma, confusion on security. As I said, let's say a country A. This country A wants to expand its, say, air force. Okay. This country A is also trying to actively increase its missile capacity. Maybe the range, maybe the arsenal overall. This country, something as simple and personal as if the country starts drafting more soldiers in its army, increasing the capacity of its armed forces. Now, all these exercises for some other country, country B, will be perceived to be what? A threat. I mean, how can you as a country B be sure that this is not just defense, but also a threat. There is no guarantee of this. So as B, what do? This is your security dilemma. Either you accept the reality and say, okay, the power dynamics have changed now. A is supreme. Sadly, I have to accept it. Or you will have to also get into the purchase or maybe increase your strength, right? Or you can form more coalitions. Join some people, other countries. Somehow you'll have to try to neutralize this threat. This is the idea of security dilemma. Please write. The perception amongst nations, with respect to enhanced security around the globe. Enhanced security around the globe and the measures it must now take. The measures it must now take. Okay. A very good example, first off, a very good example of this would be in real life. As I had discussed, if you would remember the Cold War situation, USA trying to put in more and more missiles in Europe. And because of this, Soviet had no other alternative or option. And what did Soviet do? Soviet also had to put in their missiles, the very famous SS-20 IRBM, right? As soon as the intermediate range ballistic missiles were being placed towards Europe, immediately NATO had to also bring in their IRBMs, which was called, I think, the Pershing missiles, right? The Pershing system. Now, Pershing was slightly better than SS-20 in terms of accuracy. You see how this threat kept on increasing, an increase of weapons being placed. Eventually, these missiles were all destroyed later on, but that was only after the INF treaty that was signed between Soviet and USA. But see how this happens. Any country which tries to increase its strength, it could be just for its own safety and security. Everybody else is going to perceive that as a serious concern, because I can never be sure enough what is your underlying intention, right? So the same case here. These, of course, at that point of time, SS-20 had a very long range, claimed range of 5,000. This was slightly shorter range. What we have right now is the Agni 2 and 3 are somewhat like these, IRBM. But I think the closest successor of these kind of interesting missiles are with China. They call it the Guam killer. Have you heard of this DF-26 by any chance? Anyone? DF-26? No? It's a very popular short range or intermediate range missile that China has, which is seemingly said to be the successor of especially SS-20. Though, of course, we are referring to now in 2010, 15, etc. So the quality, the technology is way better, right? So that is very popularly called the Guam killer, the DF-26. Anyway, so going back to our point of concern, the very first issue is a security dilemma. Second concept that you have to understand, which again, very simple, is balance of power. It has to be maintained, it has to consistently be restored. Balance of power. So, especially, as I said, with no central authority in picture. If any state becomes too powerful, right, other states, when I say states, I mean countries, other countries will have to either form alliances, right, or will have to increase their strength. And it's very natural, right? So, because we don't have central bodies or some global world police to keep a check. And this happens every time. I mean, think of even the Napoleonic Wars, when all these countries like Russia, Prussia, Britain, right, Austria, all these countries used to have coalitions to contain France, right? So the point always is going to be, the moment any country increases its strength, other countries face immediate challenge to counter the balance. And that will come at the cost of, the easiest would be a coalition. Simple alliance. Find some like-minded people, alliance. Now, should we call it in this category or not? But the Quad is also a part of this. Yes or no? Yes. See, USA is slightly wary of this growing influence of China in the Indo-Pacific region. So it says, let's form a group, Japan and Australia with us. Let's form a group to counter, or the initial idea is maritime security. We can't say to fight China. So we say it's for maritime security. But yes, one very important aspect is the growing influence of China in the Indo-Pacific. And we have to counter it. So see how USA wants to rope in the local players as soon as it realizes that some country is becoming too powerful, might take a dominant position in the other side of the world. Balance of power. You keep trying to restore balance of power, right? And number 3, the third one, which we all should follow at all times, is national interest. Third point, national interest. It could be through alliances. It could be through negotiating trade deals, war. But all things lead to only one, national interest. The aggregate goal of what any country wants to do is in its national interest. Either it's increasing the security, increasing the prosperity, or the prestige. So it could be in terms of security, in terms of prosperity, or in terms of prestige. This is what sums up the concept of realism. Clear? This means we are all here to fend for ourselves. And a very logical and a very humanist idea. Because in real life also, we do the exact same thing. Right? Think for ourselves first, and then think for others. That's what countries also are choosing to do these days. Right? So, 3 key terms and 4 components. This is what is the idea that we know of realism. But see, as I said, plenty of examples of realism. A very good example was Cold War. And what eventually happens because of this? Say, for example, what happened in Cold War? We had concepts like nuclear deterrence, arms race, because you have to, right? This becomes an arms race. The more one country becomes strong, the more you are forced into becoming stronger. Now what happened to Pakistan right now? Suddenly they realized that their Chinese weapons don't work very well. Or a real concern there was actually the lack of compatibility, because they are actively purchasing from both China and USA. And that's a real challenge, because US devices will not allow free compatibility with Chinese devices. They are their direct opponents. This was a real cause of concern for Pakistan, whereas India had the advantage of compatibility of all the devices we are using. So see now, Pakistan running to China first, then USA, more weapons. The threat is imminent now for them. They have to arm themselves at any cost. See, the arms race over and over again. And we know that China believes, at least, in the MAD doctrine. What is this MAD doctrine? It means mutually assured what? Destruction. That was a summary of Cold War. In fact, this mutually assured destruction is what actually prevented a full-scale war. Because both parties knew in Cold War that if the attacks happen, then it's a full-blown war and both parties will suffer. So such things might also work only in case of democracies, right? May not work well for Pakistan. So you might not expect Pakistan to have the same sanity, because they openly claimed as well on multiple platforms that we are out to destroy India. So they might not feel deterred by this fact that the response of India could be very threatening, etc., or very damaging. Their first use policy is based on this only, right? But anyway, this is the idea that we have been using. But the other concept that you will see, number 2 now, is liberalism. From realism to liberalism. Again, here things are exactly the opposite. The assumptions here, what are the assumptions? Number 1, now with respect to realism, what was the first assumption or the first key factor? State. That's it. State is a major player. But here we say that there is a rich tapestry of actors. There are multiple players on the globe. Rich tapestry of actors. How? Let's say, see, first up, you have all these international organizations. International organizations which provide for rules, regulations, orders, etc., conflict resolution. That's point 1. Then we have these MNCs, the very important aspect of global supply chain, global value chain. Right? The world is completely intertwined right now. We are using, let's say, a phone designed in USA, and then you purchase all these parts, cobalt, lithium from Chile, Ghana, and then you get the chips from South Korea, Japan. You get them assembled in China, and then you market them across the globe and see after sales service, customer support in countries like India, Philippines. So many countries are involved. Their jobs are involved. Right? So we say that these MNCs have knit the entire economic system across the globe. every country is dependent on each other, right? And then of course, we have NGOs which focus on things like human rights, which pressurize for environment rights, which meet in their chartered planes and talk about environmental protection. No, but on a more serious note, yes, they do contribute. In fact, they do create this kind of narrative for something like, say, global health. And then, in fact, even individuals, various individuals play a key role through media, through digital aid, sitting in far off places, using a keyboard. You are forcing governments to be more answerable to people. So, we say we have a rich tapestry of actors. We cannot simply say that state and only the state matters, nothing else matters. Are you clear? That's one point. Second one. So first assumption was this rich tapestry of actors. Please write. Assumption number 2. Interdependence reduces likelihood of conflict. What do you feel? Is that true? Interdependence, does it reduce the likelihood of conflict? Yes, of course it does, right? The idea is that intertwined economies, ultimately, if they sever their ties, what follows? Economic fallout, lost export, of course, disrupted global supply value. And let's not forget a very important problem, capital flight, right? We know what is the brain flight, the brain drain, but also capital flight. The perceived threat of relation between two countries and the business moves out from there. So it's also capital flight, right? You can just mention this chain, intertwined economies. Okay. Intertwined. What happens? Ties are cut or ties are severed. This means there is economic fallout. Economic fallout. The result is what? The result, you can write capital flight, global supply chain disruption, global supply chain disruption, and of course, lost export. That's a very natural progression here. Lost export. So that's again very important. See, what are the saviors, as we say? There are 3 important saviors for this. Number 1, of course, is shared values. Shared values of the idea of rule of law, the idea of democracy. So, what can be a savior in today's day and age? Just on a side note, number 1, shared values. And most fights would happen between countries which do not have shared values, different value systems. Second, this back channel support. back channel discussions. And this always happens. Because see, at the front, politicians have to also respond to public, understand. But the back channel keeps on working continuously to neutralize the situation. And of course, something which also might work is academic exchange between countries, increasing that soft interdependence. And yes, things like migration, etc., tourism as a factor, these things of course work. The more you are intertwined now, the more difficult to wage a war. A very good example of this is EU. Starting with something as basic as the coal and steel community in 1951, moving to common currency, common court, European Court of Justice. So they have, and these countries were always fighting, from adversaries to now cooperative members through a common mechanism, right? Slowly and steadily, realizing that they're just wasting their resources in waging a war. And now one of the most developed parts of the planet. So this means that if your interests are interlinked, it's going to be very low, or the chances are very low of you actually fighting. We have this in our neighborhood as well, the ASEAN. All these countries had conflicting interests in South China Sea. They said, why? Why should we fight? We all have our interests. Let's settle these through dialogue, code of conduct, peace, mutual benefit. This is the idea of liberalism. Okay. And the last one is democratic peace. Democratic peace. So there are some things that every, mature country wants. Mature democracies rarely wage a war. USA is a very unique country because USA has to also maintain its hegemony 24/7. And half its wars are to maintain its hegemony only, because it doesn't want to lose that spot. So we say that if a democracy is sufficiently mature democracies, they, I would say, rarely wage wars. Really. Because we do have the interlocking mechanism, shared values, the transparency, accountability through media, through regulatory bodies, through your own country's legislature. You have to be answerable to people. You can't go crazy and wage a war. In India, see, so many questions are raised every time some life is lost. Every drone used is causing some expenditure. And these governments have to be answerable to people. That what happened? Did we kill enough people or not? Victory is important. Now for Trump, it might not matter because this is his last chance. And that's also very unique as a problem for those countries where you know that this is my last chance to be the president. No future ahead. So that can make them go crazy. But in a country like India, you know very well that if we end up on a losing note, wasting resources with nothing to show, that's political suicide. So as we say, this interlocking mechanism, second part is transparency and accountability. And of course, economic interdependence. So these three things ensure democratic peace, shared values, transparency and accountability, and economic interdependence. Once you get this, problem resolved. At least in most cases. Right? So here, the key terms, like we had the key terms there. Should we proceed? Here the key terms are, number one, please write the subheading here now. Key terms, the first one, complex interdependence. Complex interdependence. Complex interdependence, economic, right? Social, cultural, right? Economic, social, cultural, environmental, technological, this is the level of complexity we are talking about. Complex interdependence. And then add to it things like, as I said earlier also, migration, tourism, right? See, semiconductor crisis in Taiwan sent ripples across the globe. So we are so interdependent that we cannot afford to take risk like this. Indian jobs are dependent on US markets. US companies are dependent on Indian talent. Interdependence. Okay. Second point. And this is a differentiating factor from realism. Number two. And you tell me, what would this mean? Absolute gain. So they refer to something called relative gain. Liberalism says absolute gain. Difference. What's the difference? What do you mean by absolute gain? We know what is relative gain, right? Zero-sum game. Your gain is your loss. Balance. But then what is absolute gain?
Both win.
Everybody wins. It might not be the same for all, but ultimately the objective is the overall prosperity. Might not be perfectly distributed. We fully agree. But overall prosperity. Please write there. Total increase in wealth. Total increase in wealth. Total increase in wealth, comma, security, comma, welfare, etc. Regardless of benefit distribution. Regardless of benefit distribution. Make sense? So, benefit distribution might not be perfect regardless of benefit distribution. But what we expect is this. Net improvement. That's it. So, my improvement does not come at the cost of your improvement. We can all grow together. It might not be the same, but we all grow together. Just like when you and your friends study together, both can clear the exam, is the idea. And if both clear, that's great. If only one clears, very bad. Right? For the other, of course. That's the worst thing to happen, right? Your friend, your neighbor, your cousin clears the exam, you don't. Let's hope that never happens to you. Okay. So that's the idea. Net improvement. See, the third aspect of liberalism is this belief in norms and rules. The last, number 3, is, please write, norms and rules. You can write below this. Institutions codify shared expectations and impose penalties. Okay. Examples could be treaties, conventions, protocols. Treaties, binding on one or multiple parties. Conventions, treaties which are open for all. Protocols, addendum to treaties. You can be a signatory, no problem. And then if you like it, then ratify it. Be full party to it, stage by stage. So this is how the world functions, is what this idea of liberalism believes in. And we say that hardcore realism is something you experience in Indo-China relations. Liberalism is something you experience in India-US relations. And a hybrid of sorts would be a body like Quad, based on the idea of realism containing some threat and also mutual benefit for these 3 countries in picture. Oh, of course, apart from US. So see, we have various ways to deal with other countries, depending on what the response has been and of course what our past learning has been. Clear? And if you can understand these 2 very basic theories, you'll realize that in most cases, we also respond in the exact same manner. It's either liberalism or hardcore realism. Now, of course, we cannot have absolute liberalism because national interest is of extreme importance to us. So what could be there is this model a lot, and especially with varying degree. So there's nothing called absolute liberalism. How would that be possible? No, especially for us, might not be great. So we have higher degree of liberalism, lesser of realism, but hybrid. It moves in this range. Next time you ever come across articles and Indian response, not just India's response, any 2 countries, just a bit of Google search on their dependence and you realize the very first question, that economic interdependence does not necessarily always mean that we won't wage wars, but finding the balance, that the standoff continues and the trade also goes on. Both have to go on, right? So let's end our discussion here only on this very small topic. By the way, just to clarify, this topic has had multiple questions in the examination, 2023, 22. In fact, we have had straightforward questions from comparison between these 2 theories. How does it apply in the world today? What about national interest? How does it play a significant role? So now you know the concept actually. All you need to do is just put in examples. And this is how we prefer covering IR. Knowing through chains and links the hardcore topic and the concept, it's easy to mug up as well, that you know those keywords. And if you mug up in this fashion those keywords, then these will of course reflect in your answer. That is what will differentiate your answer from an answer, of course, which would be a GS answer. And yes, we'll also add some thinkers. I do not want to bore you with thinkers, etc. Quoting Kant would not make any sense right now on liberalism because it requires some back information, right? So that is why we start with political science first, the very first section, that you get to know all these ideas, and then you move forward, and then you cover the section B, implementation of section A. And again in IR as well, we don't jump directly to India and the world because it's exciting. Firstly, a bit of theory, and then slowly and steadily we start linking, and you will find that these theories work very well in real world. And that will help you have your own opinion also. Of course, we'll keep on discussing on various authors and their articles on a regular basis. But I keep on saying that that's not some marker of final solution or quality. We have to keep on thinking, come back to the theory again and again, and find out your own way to resolve the problem. The more distinct your answer, the better it is. Because problems with these kind of optionals is that a lot of people take this optional. This is the most popular optional in terms of number of students appearing in the main examination, just to clarify, for online also, right? Maybe not in a city, right? But across the country. This is by far the most popular optional. Of course, one reason is the GS overlap. But then when it comes to the answers in PSIR, it must reflect uniqueness of thought. That means knowing those key terms, writing those examples, but that element of freshness is required. And that can take you from 275 to 325. Just like ethics score can take you from 100 to 140. The same thinker, the same crisis of conscience, right? But presented differently. Are you clear? Okay. So that's it. Okay. That's all for me. Jai Hind, and hope to see you in the class on 15th.